Apparently, the most dangerous radical in Catholicism isn't a priest. He's not an exorcist, he's not a bishop or a cardinal. He's not even a rigid Neo-Pelagian trad. No, the most dangerous man in Catholicism is a radical with extremist views who should be kept, at best, at arm's length. Certainly don't let your children hear what he has to say, because he might lead them away from the values that the world holds most dear. Who is this most dangerous figure? Why should you avoid him? I'll let the super trustworthy Irish media tell us all about him, but first, let me introduce you to the most dangerous man in the Catholic Church today. Brace yourself. His message is horrifying.
Chastity is humanly impossible. I agree. But there is a God, and with him all things are possible. Because one of the things you most quickly discover when practicing chastity on your own is, I can't do this. I'm going to fall on my face and fall on my face and fall on my face. Sometimes God lets us fall on our face enough times so we realize this isn't human willpower that's going to make you pure. Purity comes from God. It's a gift from him. And if we're not asking for it, and we're not going to the sacraments, and we're not praying, and we're not plugged into the source of love, which is God himself, it's just going to be human effort. And it'll last a while, but then you're going to fall. And let's be honest, I mean, especially as guys, we cause 90% of our own temptations by what we look at and who we hang out with and who we choose to date.
I know. Horrifying. How very dare he? But in all seriousness, the Irish media are cautioning people about his extremist views. You have to see what they have to say for yourself to believe it, so let's look at the character assassination of Jason Evert. For what crime is Jason being labeled as a dangerous radical? For speaking about, dare I even say it, chastity. Yes, chastity, which runs against one of the most prized things the secular world seeks after: physical pleasure to distract the self from the ravages of a nihilistic worldview. But who has labeled him a radical? The Irish. Yes, formerly Catholic Ireland, more accurately, the Irish media, have labeled Jason Evert a radical. I bring this up today because his tale is a cautionary tale for all of us, for what is happening to him is something that awaits us all. Let's look at these accusations. Our story today comes from RTE, an Irish media outlet which describes itself as Ireland's national public service broadcaster. It's probably closely akin to NPR, the BBC, or something like that. The hit piece in question is written by a young feminist calling herself Emma O'Kelly. Her piece comes across as measured, but in reality it shows just how disordered the world has become, and especially how far Catholic Ireland has fallen. But here's the story. Quoting the opening paragraph, changing certain words only for this platform and to be more suitably Catholic in language. Quote, "At least two of a number of talks that a controversial American Catholic chastity campaigner was expected to deliver to Irish school students will not now take place. Jason Evert advocates chastity for teens and young adults. In books and in speeches, he has called same-sex attraction and the use of contraceptives disordered." End quote. Okay, first, I don't know that Jason Evert has ever been described as controversial, especially in the U.S. where he's from. I don't even know what his liturgical preferences are, his stated position on Amoris Laetitia, where he falls on the trad to Novus Ordo spectrum, or if he's ever said anything about public figures or made any statements that will get him labeled controversial. A Google search doesn't really return much, so I suspect that Miss Emma labeled him controversial for repeating what the church teaches on these issues, using the church's accepted language. But what else are we to expect, honestly? If you've paid any attention to the state of formerly Catholic Ireland, then you know that the situation there is spiritually dire, suffering under the logical consequences of radical secularization and the loss of identity more broadly. But let's continue. A number of schools associated with the Archdiocese and with Opus Dei were going to host Mr. Everett's talks on morality and chastity aimed at young people, but have since been cancelled. Miss Emma decides to then illustrate Mr. Everett's thought crimes. Quote, "In one text aimed at promoting chastity among boys and young men, Mr. Evert writes about same-sex attraction. A guy who has these attractions may not want them or even know where they're coming from. Perhaps they stem from an unhealthy relationship with his father, an inability to relate to other guys, or even redacted abuse." I redacted that. He goes on to write, "The same-sex act is disordered, much like contraceptive sex between heterosexuals. Both acts are directed against God's natural purpose for sex, babies, and bonding." End quote. That is a textbook example of what the church teaches in better places where the faith is still attempted to be taught. And for that he's being painted a radical by some members of the Irish media. That poll quote is followed by a local acronym activist quotes talking about the statistics of people in Ireland who suffer with this sort of attraction in a naked attempt to make Evert out to be a radical. And here's the thing. In a way, they are right. In this evil, fallen world, the Catholic who defends marriage and the family are the radicals. Remember, Our Lady told Sister Lucia that the final battle will be over marriage and the family, and anyone who stands up to fight for marriage and the family will be martyred and slandered. Which brings me to my point in presenting to you the story of the most radical man in the Catholic Church, Jason Evert. He is guilty of defending the Catholic faith, and defending the truths of the faith in the public square. How dare he? But to continue, the article in question lays out Mr. Evert's heinous crimes against humanity. Here's the final quote from the article. Quote, "On the use of condoms, Mr. Evert opposes," he writes, "Manhood is found in total self-giving, not in hiding behind a barrier. Wait until God blesses you with a bride, and then be free and unafraid to give yourself to her totally." Mr. Evert's website urges young people to launch chastity projects within their schools and churches. According to Catholic website catholicireland.net, the theme of Mr. Evert's tour is "It Starts with the Heart." The website states that topics to be covered are likely to include friendships, dating as a Catholic, being truly free to love, the meaning of sex, Christian marriage, and more. End quote. Again, how terrible, how horrifying, how evil. The article goes on to recount how the James Martin Brigade of activists contacted these schools and grilled them on how they would dare to bring a monster like this to their schools and expose young people to his wickedness. Again, how very dare he be Catholic to the point of believing in what the Church teaches and being willing to make a life bringing the hardest everyday truths of the faith to the most vulnerable Catholics around the Western world. By now it should be obvious that this story is a cautionary tale for any and all Catholics who would dare to defend chastity, marriage, and the family, and the natural law in the public square. Like I've said elsewhere, they're coming for your children, and if you oppose this, you are the monster. That is the state of the world today. Again, I don't know Jason's allegiances on the Triad to Nova sort of spectrum, and in this case I don't really care. Our Lady of Fatima said that more souls go to hell for sins against the flesh than for any other sins, so he is doing God's work fighting for souls in a very real way. And for that he's being deplatformed and cancelled in formerly Catholic Ireland. I'm sure it's happened elsewhere already. But get ready for this to be the new normal, for if it hasn't happened where you are, it's going to happen more and more frequently. The forces of darkness in this sick, sick world cannot stand a defense of marriage and a challenge to sex being elevated to the level of an idol. Anyone who stands against that is going to be destroyed in the public square. So pray for Jason Evert and pray for formerly Catholic Ireland. Pray that it returns to the faith soon. Thank you for listening. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.